welcome to the Adara Labs webinar series by HBR Arabia and MIT Technology Review Arabia. My name is Solveig Nicholas, and I am pleased to be the host today for this important topic, education and skilling for the future workforce. I've spent my career in the area of strategic human capital development, and to say that it is an exciting time in this industry is an understatement. Never in history has the need for learning and development been more important, or the nature of work been in such flux. Long before COVID, the world of work was changing. Artificial intelligence, automation, and robotics make this shift as significant as the mechanization in prior generations of agriculture and manufacturing. While some jobs will be lost and many others created, almost all will change. There's a lot of research and innovative ideas that are shaping the future of work, discussions about the future of remote employees post-COVID, and what a post-pandemic workforce will be like in general. How to maintain a culture in remote work environments, especially with new employees. The future of work in Europe, Japan, North America, etc. What will be the same and what will be different? How are these changes impacted by regional and national culture? But nothing is more important than the discussion surrounding the topics of education and skills necessary for the future workforce. If current data is to be believed, the shelf life of many skills is about 5 years. If that is true, the average person will need to upskill themselves 5 to 6 times throughout their career. That is a massive paradigm shift for many who viewed their education as complete when they finished their degree and now find themselves in mid-career, and the work inflection points have changed the industries in which they work. Today, we're going to discuss this subject and many impacts it has for individuals and organizations. What are the key areas to focus on? Who is responsible for this upskilling? And what areas should people be focusing on? My guest today is Dimitris Tsouroplis. He joined Crescent Enterprises in February 2020 as Human Resource Director in charge of the company's human capital development. Prior to that, he's held senior managerial positions in HR for several multinational companies, including BP, Coca-Cola, Vodafone, and Libra Group. He has wide-ranging international experience throughout Europe, the Balkans, and the Middle East, with particular expertise in rewards, resourcing, talent management, and M&A restructuring considerations. Dimitris began his career with BP Exploration in Aberdeen and continued with BP Hellas, Panafone, the Coca-Cola Company, Southeast Europe and Middle East, and Vodafone. At Vodafone, he became head of human resources for Greece, and subsequently with the Libra Group, a family conglomerate business in shipping, aviation, and energy, in which he held the HR director role based in New York and London. Dimitris has studied business management and economics and holds a Master's of Science in Business and Management from the University of Aberdeen and a postgraduate degree in HR from the International Institute for Management Development. It is my pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Solveig, for hosting me today. Wow, it sounded quite big as an introduction, I would say. But thank you. Yes, indeed, the most challenging, I would say, period of my life was when I joined Crescent back in February, because I just changed the country and a company just before the pandemic. So it was a challenge, but it was a great opportunity. So yes, thank you. It would be a pleasure to discuss the topics, the hot topics, as you said today.
Well, and I'm going to come back to that one that joined in February in a moment, because I think some of the most fun stories for anyone have been the ones I joined in January. I joined in February, I joined in March, and what has happened since. But before we jump into that, I want to welcome our audience. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Please feel free to engage with us with questions as we go through this discussion. Please put your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box, in the Q&A box, just because I can't monitor both. So if you can put them there, we appreciate it. And with that, we'll jump in. And it's something that we chatted very briefly before the call started, but I want to take a step back for a moment. In light of, a year ago, we would have had this very conversation, but talked specifically about the fourth industrial revolution. But those leaps in technology, the demographic evolution, and globalization haven't changed. So what are the new skills required in the workforce to adjust to those changes in how we work?
Well, this is a question we are asked quite often, I would say, and it is a dynamic one because it changes every, as you said, probably every other five years. Let me start by borrowing something that Warren Buffett has said, and I tend to follow it as well. It's what characteristics a candidate should have. And to me, the three main characteristics I seek to a good candidate is the energy level, is the intelligence, and also is the integrity. Imagine if anything is missing out of the three, especially integrity. So we categorize integrity as the major characteristic. So these days, I would say we are looking for the super candidate. We have a long list of soft skills maybe that we definitely we try to tick our boxes next to when we interview people. We can start, of course, with confidence. Confidence, it's the major thing you need just to open the doors. When you start the job hunting, it's something like is your presence, is something that will basically help you against your get the job against your competitors, even your friends next to you. I would say emotional, also as social intelligence is very important these days. Of course, you can have the IQ, but sometimes this does not match with your skills of emotional and social intelligence. Or critical thinking. Critical thinking is very important as well because it's the ability to think clearly and rationally, understanding the logical connections between ideas. Just to conclude the list with several other aspects that we would like to have: communication skills. It's also very important. Leadership, decisiveness, teamwork, other than problem solving, networking skills. These are quite important for us to identify in every candidate we interview, specifically in specific roles. And it's not only just because these skills are for the role we're trying to hire for, but also is for the potential the candidate has to grow and develop themselves with a business. These days, of course, most of the young generation is tech savvy, but we can separate these in two areas, like the users who are really good using all the software we as a user can do, like the Office, Microsoft Office. But also I realized by the time that there are certain types of candidates who just want to learn beyond that and become maybe something like programmers for the job. So there are people who maybe these days learn Python by themselves or R in order to help themselves in financial analysis. So this is quite common these days. And that I applaud because I see that people try to be agile in learning, and it's an important skill to us. Now, I suppose like these for us are, I would say, major, because there is a quite endless list of things sometimes that, depending on the job and the company, they ask for. But I believe these are the major ones that someone looks for, especially these days.
Well, and you alluded to something, so I'm actually going to jump ahead in my questions and get to one. It is a very unique period in history for many, many reasons, but one very specific one is the fact that we have a new generation entering the workforce who don't have necessarily the work experience or the industry experience as their senior leaders and managers, but have a wealth of tech experience and ability to analyze, interpret, apply, gather data in a way that's sort of never been seen before. How are you going about merging these two generations in the workplace?
Well, I can tell you that I've been to companies that we had to merge 4 generations, not only 2 generations. And imagine like in situations where you just bring the huge experience and the treasure of knowledge the old generation holds, and the hunger, the agility, the flexibility, the technology advantage the young generation has. So combining these two together, of course, it's a cultural thing. You need to have this culture. You need to have as a base the high respect of each other. And once you combine those two, I have seen people sitting next to the older generation to teach them on how to use the computers or the Excel or even a PowerPoint, versus in exchange of getting the experience and the stories and the history of the knowledge these people hold. This is probably the strength of a company, to manage knowledge well, and of course give to the young generation the tool to progress and of course grow the company further. I would say, like, in the past, we might, maybe not far in the past, we used to hear stories like young people going into new jobs, and the previous generation, I'm not going to specify age, they were asking them, how old are you? And when they say I'm 20, 22, 25, the question is, but okay, you're very young, you don't know things. I can assure you that today, 25-year-old people who are entering the market have much more experiences than the 25 back at that time. They travel more, they are exposed into completely different worlds of social media, of news, of knowledge, and this has shaped them in a completely different way that I doubt anyone can accuse them that they don't have any more the knowledge or the experience. They have a certain type of experience and they can grow faster, but I could see that in my children. I mean, when I was at their age, I definitely had not their skills. So this amalgama that we try to create in generations, I think is the benefit not only for the companies, but also for the society.
I agree with you. And I'm actually going to revisit your conversation about culture in a moment. I want to jump back. Actually, we do have a question from one of our members of the audience. Nabil, thank you for participating. And he wants to go back to your conversation about integrity, as you mentioned, as one of the 3 key characteristics for the super candidate. And his specific question is, how do you define and evaluate integrity?
I think, Nabil, thanks for the question. Integrity to me is all about a Greek word where I come from, and it's ethos. It's all about being ethical in whatever you do in your life. So if you have this equation that I just mentioned before, which you have the high level of energy of someone and the high intelligence, but integrity is missing, I think you can easily predict the outcome of what kind of business this person might do. And to be honest, I was quite unlucky to face that in previous jobs I had, where integrity was missing. Integrity is all your values. And if your values are quite matched with the company's values, then is what we always need. And believe me, in the family businesses, and especially like Crescent Enterprises, the family values is imperative, and what we definitely, I would say, look for. And if I answer this question, I think the top 1 characteristic, and when we start an interview, is to identify the ethics of someone. And it's what will separate us eventually from, so far, not well developed in artificial intelligence. There are no ethics actually in artificial intelligence. So it's something which characterizes and makes us as quite unique in that area. So I think if I answered well, Nabil, is all your values, everything that comes and defines you as a person in order to be able to work without the other 2 characteristics I said before.
Well, as they say, you can always train for skill. You can't train for values, for ethics. That is something that you have to have fundamentally coming in. Now, getting to the skills, we talked about the soft skills as being fundamental to the super candidate because they're obviously so relevant today. How would you, when you guide, in your role or in the market in general, how would you guide individuals so that they can keep upskilling? You made the correct statement that shelf life of skills is as short as 5 years, some of them as short as 18 months. How do you set up an ecosystem, encourage people so that they will keep developing themselves?
I think it's a combination of things. Of course, the company is responsible to provide that upskilling because we identified that without upskilling, there will be no prosperity, and basically there will be no economic growth as well in the broader spectrum. So upskilling is part of the responsibility of the company to provide, but also from the employee to accept and strive for it. As I told you before, I had the examples of employees, quite young employees, that they realized that what they just learn from the university is not adequate enough to help them in the real work life. So many times, of course, universities is the first and most important, I would say, step for you before you enter the professional environment. The most important is the way that it helps you of thinking, but it's not on the actual and practical way of working. So with that, the upskilling during on the job and throughout the years, I think is the most important thing for every candidate and every professional who grows eventually. And I can give you, as I said, like before, there are examples of people who never learned a specific programming languages to help them on the job, but they realized for the job they do, they have to develop their skills themselves. So eventually they did so. I can give you other examples of skills that we had to reinvent. So in the past, and because one of my hobbies was sailing, when I was sailing, or even when we were driving, we didn't have GPS. I'm not talking about 100 years ago, but in any case, we didn't have, we had to use a part of our brain in order to guide ourselves either on the sea or on the road, which now this is kind of obsolete. We don't have to do that anymore. I mean, we have a GPS on our hand and this can guide us. So we free up some space from our brain to utilize it for other skills we might need in order to do other things. And this is going to be a progress. I don't think we're gonna sideline or we're gonna be less competent by using technology. I think we're going to probably augment with artificial intelligence at some point and create that upskilling, as we call it, prospects in order to grow as humans and also as companies.
Now, to that point, we have another question from the audience related to the university, and I'm going to make this a little bit of a two-part question. So Amal, thank you very much for participating in this. How big is the gap today between the university students and the companies in the Middle East, and are graduates well prepared for the jobs they're facing?
Well, it's as big as small. I know it's a bit civilic what I'm saying, but imagine like we have jobs today that we call, there is no actually any university that can teach them. So when talking about social media manager, I haven't seen, at least a few years ago, any school. Of course, it comes from communications, but as a specialty of social media manager or social media director, we have it. It wasn't part of the studies. And also the blockchain. Blockchain comes as a different aspect of technology, but it's not part of the university at the moment studies. So as I said, university is a very good way of thinking. It puts the main base in order to grow into your career. Of course, find the first job and then start learning. But still, I think there are quite substantial gaps between what the world now needs, and that is what the university should catch up with. Should follow the market, understand the needs. I don't think can be proactive much, but at least understand the market and where the market goes somehow, so to help align and minimize that gap. In our world, I think now universities, what I've seen is that people try to be more generalists. So in that case, they might specialize in one area, but they try to do other studies, not only just after university, but within the career life. Maybe they do an MBA or they do other master's degrees or individual programs that help them broaden that kind of level of experience they have and actually give them more opportunities to find maybe different career paths. So this is something that also university helps a lot.
Now, this is something that's a bit of a personal crusade for me, just because my career has been post-academic, executive education, professional development. I'm wondering how you feel as a representative of a large organization and having worked for many others, how open are you and the industries that you've dealt with related to the idea of non-traditional academic? You made some very good examples of skills that people need that there aren't even degrees for. And so we really have to broaden our openness and acceptance of non-academic credentialing. And I'm wondering how open and receptive you see in the market to be to that idea.
Not to the level I would imagine or what I wanted to. I'm very open on the skills. Someone can have tremendous skills even if it doesn't have an academic background, but at the moment it's quite prerequisite. You see that you compete versus people who have not only just anymore a university degree, but they go beyond. And if you see CVs these days of graduates, you see like the level of skills that they have is enormous. But I will have to add something here, two things, if you allow me. The one thing is that I interviewed once a candidate whose on paper was fantastic. He had the best academic background. He had a very good master's degree. The grades were at the top level. And then I was looking at the CV and I said like, wow, absolutely. You are a top star as a student, but where is your professional experience? Have you had any internship? And I don't mean any internship like an internship in a company. It can be any job you decide to do while you're a student. Even if it is a waiter, even if it is a salesperson, it gives you a tremendous experience on how to communicate, how to respect, how to adapt, how to acknowledge, how to even tolerate things. It shapes you as a professional in the future. And absolutely, there was no experience at all. It had a fantastic academic background. It was studies 24/7, probably no, all the summers were just studying, but no experience. So this was quite negative to me. So one advice I would just suggest, do as many internships and whatever kind you can while you're in the university, and then focus it more on experienced internships while you're entering the corporate world. Just bear in mind on the second part I would like to discuss about is a friend of mine who is a professor in a university in the UK told me like there is a statistics that approximately 30% of the current jobs will be eliminated in the next 10 years. So people who currently study of specific, say, engineering studies, maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, the skills or the studies they do might be completely obsolete or eliminated in the future. So they have to upskill themselves and or maybe reskill themselves. Depends.
And let me just make a note to some of the audience who are putting some of their questions in the chat. Please, if you missed them down, please put them in the Q&A box so that I can see them all. To your point about the need for upskilling and the recognition of that rate of change, the marriage of a brilliant CV with no soft skills, with no experience, is it a question of experience, or is it a question of almost mindset towards that? They sort of not recognize the need for that whole level of soft skills. There's a huge, well, let me stop there and then I'll have a second part to that question in a moment.
Okay, yes, okay. So I think correctly spotted, I think everything starts with mindset. Mm-hmm. I think is with the maturity to recognize what you need and how you're going to achieve it. It's probably the skills also you have to understand what you're missing and what you try to achieve maybe becomes a burden in your future career rather than become your benefit or it becomes your strength. So mindset is all about I would say to start with, to be the starting point for everything you do from that point onwards. Let me give you another example about mindset. I had several cases in the past where parents were approaching me for their children, and they were providing me with their CVs. Of course, this is absolutely no issue, but and it's something we always accept. But the difference was that I was insisting. I said, fine, thank you for the CV. Please tell to your child or just to contact me. And there was no contact between me and the child. It was basically contact between me and the parent. So what kind of mindset this brings, and how can I approach that future candidate with the confidence or the skills or the I would say, or the energy that we discussed to be able to hire them. So this is quite as an advice, just be yourself, be confident, go forward yourselves, make mistakes. That's always acceptable, make mistakes. We are here to make mistakes. But beyond that, go forward yourselves. Don't put someone else on your behalf. It's a completely lost case.
Now, I want to dive a little bit into a comment you made before, talking about upskilling and how it is the joint responsibility between the organization and the individual. In keeping with the idea of the shifting idea of multiple phases of a career, it's largely been discussed that people are not likely to stay for 30 years in one organization. A family business may be an exception if you're a member of the family, but largely individuals shift. At what point, there is, of course, the fine balance of upskilling, reskilling to keep good employees within an organization, but then the recognition that it might be time to move on, be it the individual's choice or the organization's choice. And how are you, having been in a number of very large organizations, how have you seen that evolution in thought and practice?
Okay, talking about, let me separate a bit the family businesses, because family businesses are completely different, I would say, world. And it's a better one, but I can explain that later. Allow me to do that at a later stage. So in the corporate world, the new trend is that the young generation, if we call it the millennials, they are not staying more than 2 to 3 years in one role. I think it's a natural, I would say, instinct of them want to explore further. Not only explore businesses, but explore the world. And most of them have traveled half the world, working in different positions, in different companies at very early stages. So this is quite a difficult scenario for us as human resources professionals, how to attract, develop, and retain those talents. And actually there is no straightforward answer to that, because maybe that is the new normal. They need to open their wings, and they need to see so many different experiences throughout their professional life. You mentioned about my career, and I feel blessed about my career, also lucky. But someone told me you have to work hard to be lucky. Probably yes. The factor luck is because I've tried to work from Aberdeen to Europe, to the US, to Middle East, but I gained experiences. I had the chance once to help a friend of mine who was working in one of my companies, in my previous companies, the corporate world, for about approximately 15 years, probably his first job. And I had to circulate his CV around and say, like, he's looking for his next career step. And the answer by people who were not that, I would say, the millennial or the younger generation, they were approximately from the previous generations, they were very skeptical by saying, but he doesn't have any other experience in any other company. And I was surprised. And I said, like, wow, actually what we're trying to achieve here in certain ways, like to retain them, to develop the people, you see it as kind of an issue in the future. If someone is quite loyal in one company and leaves after that because he only knows one way, he only knows certain processes and policies rather than have seen the world. Well, I realized that, and it shocked me, but I reflected to myself when I said, like, well, I had the chance to work at a global scale in different companies, acquire different skills, and see new trends or see new systems, which helped me in every step of my career, which I would advise that. I would strongly advise that. When someone realizes that there is no further step and somehow they stop their progress within a company, they should definitely think of moving to another step. Even if it is to change a country, not only, don't be afraid to change countries. I think these days the world needs that. And probably it's like the kindergarten for a better opportunities. keep COVID aside, keep the pandemic aside, which we might come back to that. It brought a lot of opportunities. I think we're going to have a reset in 2021 and see forward a brighter future.
Now, I can't let you get away with it. I have to go back. How are family businesses better?
Oh, wow. Do we have enough time?
Well, just a few minutes.
Okay. So one of my previous CEOs used to say that I would like to run our business as a private one. Basically, I couldn't understand what he meant back at the time because I've never been in a private business. We had a kind of a motto at the time. We would like our business to run with speed, simplicity, and trust. So that was so difficult to achieve. A corporate business is like a big tanker. It's very difficult to turn. It's very difficult to speed up. It just has one rota and it goes towards that direction. Of course, it changes, but slowly. So with that, I understood that all the weight that it holds is about bureaucracy, slow processes, slow decision-making in certain levels. So that kept everything back because it had a lot of hierarchical steps to reach before you take a decision. Moving to private companies, and especially today, to our private company, I would say, I realized that speed, simplicity, and trust is the essence, is the way we do business. And with that is a speedboat. It's a speedboat that takes fast decision, hierarchy is very lean, you can have approach on any level as long as you need to do your job, and pretty much I would say it's with zero bureaucracy. We use every means in technology and we exchange messages whenever we need to do something, and the decision will never be doubt like, oh, I didn't have it in email, I didn't have it signed, is a decision, move on, do your job. So with that, you see that family businesses manage to grow tremendously by being more innovative, more creative, more fast, and I would say now these days attracting more young generation because they can give them more responsibility rather than keep them in a silo and not allow them to see the bigger spectrum or the bigger opportunities that arise. And that is what I think I realized I would like to follow this path with private businesses because it helped me as a professional to help other people.
Excellent answer. Of the idea of speed, simplicity, and trust, it's very interesting because that's very much in part of some of the fundamentals to the idea of the new book, Humanocracy, and the foundations of how cultural alignment with strategy is more effective. And those are some of the components of it. So it's good to see that it is being applied in some places. Now I'm going to jump a little back to our audience because I've gotten flooded with questions and I don't want to ignore them. But from Dr. Latha, she has asked, as a professor, we are a role model and express importance of value systems and business ethics. But most of the informed business decisions based on business analytics forces them to take decisions based on facts and figures through AI and analytics, ignoring human value systems. How do we tackle this situation? Any advice?
Well, actually, I'm a strong advocate of all the professors that they actually is the first, I would say, chamber before the professional, I would say, living room. They are, I still remember my professors about the values they passed to me, and their job is remarkable. They have to insist. They have to insist on that, but they have to understand that also there is another professor next to them that is teaching AI. So everything is in parallel. There is the world of the university, which I suggest it's very important to maintain the values, to be who they are at the moment, but also help the companies because we look at them as advisors as well. We go to them on every step of our growth. I would say like today and proudly say today at Crescent, we do have people who we sponsor them to do MBAs. And I would say this is an investment. It's beyond any bonus, any benefit you provide them, but is a career investment for themselves. So actually and I had my chance to go again to the university. after I finished it, like maybe 10, 15 years after I finished university, I had the chance to go back and realize how important is to sit with the professors who definitely, even after 15 years of career, they just reset my mindset. They just reset it off the back of all the companies I was, to help me to see a different world, again, reestablish values and move on. Because actually the values come from the people, and actually the companies are relied on us. And the companies should also, I would say, from top down, create the same values. So it is difficult. It is difficult based on the world we live and the technological advancements we have. But I would say, stick where you are. Their role is pivotal to our generation.
Now, you've mentioned values a number of times. You used the word respect before, and I want to loop this around to the idea of culture. You talked, speed, simplicity, trust. You said respect. There's values. How important do you feel the subject of culture is relative to the strategic alignment and success of an organization, and how in a function like yours do you help people recognize that and implement that within an organization?
Well, the culture, to me, it has two ways. The one is either is an enabler or is a blocker. So where the culture becomes an enabler, there is a lot of growth, there is a good performance, and the culture usually starts from top. Wherever I've worked, usually the culture was from top down approach. I haven't seen any culture to start from bottom up. So with that in mind, I would say strong leadership is really important in companies. Culture as to become an enabler is, I would say, to keep employees happy. Not happy in a monetary way, but especially now here living in the UAE, I'm happy also to see several surveys on applications. How happy are you today? So about happiness, it's a correlation with performance. So keeping them happy, of course, it's keeping them busy, but showing them the appreciation and actually giving them the opportunities and the development, let's say the skills or the potential to grow further. This is what the employees need. Where the culture becomes a blocker is where the culture is micromanaging, is putting employees in silos, is keeping information away, and there is no transparency and there is a lack of trust, that this culture becomes a blocker to me. And I think those companies, either we realize they never had a future before, or we can realize now they don't have a future from now.
Now, I would be remiss. Unfortunately, I think people are equal parts sick of talking about it and still needing to talk about it. COVID. We started mentioning it very loosely, and you alluded a number of times to opportunities that you view from COVID. And so I want to take that as the lens that we, what have you seen as positive? You joined your organization literally when COVID was a baby, and have seen that us ridden through it in a new place that you had fresh eyes. How have you seen it as an opportunity? What do you think has come out of it?
Well, again, someone said, which I really like this expression, don't let a crisis get wasted.
Yes.
So with that in mind, I feel like COVID, it was a great opportunity, despite the fact that it's a pandemic. And of course, it's a very sad event that people actually died from it. But as a change that created because of the situation of lockdowns, and in a case of limitation of freedom of people to move, it created a necessity for the companies to continue to work and the world not to stop. At some point, we felt like it stood still. It was not the case. Actually, it was the point where the change happened. And it was an accelerated change, and it was probably an abrupt one, but to the better. Based on statistics, what I've read recently is that probably accelerated digital transformation by 6 years. Imagine like it brought back, it just created a completely new world for all of us. And a company which it's a family business. Of course, we have our offices, we have our own ways of doing things with our meetings, with flying people over for the interviews, we would like to see face to face. That of course couldn't be lost, but we couldn't operate otherwise. We had to change, we had to adjust to a new way of doing things. So what happened is technology helped us a lot. I think it has the fundamental base at the moment to help us move forward. Like we use Zoom, we use Teams, we use WebEx. It is the initial form of helping us operate and communicate and continue working at a certain level. Eventually, we're gonna see more ways of how we're gonna operate, but it also brought a lot of work from home, which was not part of the kind of, that was not part of even the fantasy of some companies. They wouldn't even imagine that they will allow people to work from home. And out of a sudden, they had to implement that overnight. And they realized that it works. And it works perfectly well because an employee who is responsible, is trustworthy, and works in the office, the same responsibility will apply at home. And I totally believe that. We trust our employees, we know how hard work, so it doesn't matter where they are, they will be able to be productive and performing at the top level. With that, I'm not sure I've mentioned before, but I believe we are at about of a turn point where we're not gonna talk about work from home, but eventually in several companies, we might talk about work from anywhere. We have a tremendous power now on our hands, our mobile phone, that it gives us a lot of opportunities to be flexible in our life and simultaneously be able to be productive at our work, connected with our laptop. I think the only mistake we have done, it was on how we did it. We need to learn better on how to manage our work-life balance. Apparently, everybody found themselves within a house, with the family, with the children, with online schooling, and the distractions were quite an issue for everyone who would like to work from home. But eventually, if we manage it in a certain way, it will help a lot in the work-life balance. It will give a lot of freedom to people. It will, at least to us, it showed that it's probably the initiator of innovation and creativity. People felt much better, and still, while I would say initially it was quite, I would say, abrupt, the whole change on how we're gonna operate with people working from home, we took the decision that, of course, the pandemic is an issue and we wouldn't like to risk anything for our employees, but we work well, and we shall continue working from home till probably, I don't know, till the vaccine comes out, or at least we have a rapid change and we are more safe to come back. So this is the one thing, the work from home and the remote access, the digital transformation that created overnight, but also in our lives. It showed us that we can do things that we never believed before it can happen. So the pandemic, it was something that our generation had to live. But at the end, I think we can become, we go stronger out of it, and with, I would say, better skills and habits.
Now, in that, right before we started, you and I were talking briefly about the opportunities it presented just from a geographically diverse workforce, because if we are able to work from anywhere long-term, we can hire from anywhere long-term. And I'm wondering how rapidly your organization might be adopting that, or you're seeing how rapidly is the market adopting that, or are people trying to push back towards business as usual?
I don't know what exactly business as usual will mean. With that, definitely I cannot predict, but definitely we're going to have changes in the way we work. We became a bit more open-minded. Just to give you another example, because I like the stories, the real stories. In the past, it was very difficult for a company, especially for a family business, I would say, to operate beyond the borders of, say, the UAE, we are now. We wouldn't easily think that we can hire someone to work for us remotely, but now these days, that everyone who is working remotely makes no difference to us where the person is located. And actually, we open our horizons and we realized that we can hire someone in Canada and we can hire someone in Australia. And no matter the time difference, they can equally provide work for us at a different scale, time zone, but at the level of performance and capacity that we would like to. So this part is the reality. And that definitely make a huge difference. And I think the talent acquisition now, it's on a global scale. And I know many companies, in other companies, this was absolutely the norm. And there are companies like I know, more technology companies, that they have people working globally from different locations, and that's the norm. But for us, it was just a big change. One change, though, I would like to mention, that I really enjoyed that this whole turbulence brought was the diversity issue, that I think it started normalize. And when I say diversity, I would say, okay, the first diversity is the gender diversity, but if we go beyond the gender diversity, it helped in other aspects too. On the gender diversity, my observation in the past, in the previous companies I worked for, was that I could see women who had the mother role, that they were working 6-7 hours full, the heads down, no break, just to go back and continue with the other role they had at home. While men had the opportunity probably to prolong that, maybe have another coffee, have another chit chat, and prolong that and leave after 8 or 10 hours, maybe in cases made look more productive, which was not the case. And this time, this has reset. You have just people who work and perform. You don't see actually the gender. You see someone who can do the job and help the mothers by being close to the children while they're homeschooling to be able to work same time. That never happened before. It also gave a lot of actually opportunities to disabled people, because people who do not have the access to either to commute or to enter buildings with the right infrastructure, now they have the ability from the comfort of their home to work from a computer or just being from customer service or phones. These are, and I was discussing this with a specific organization who is headhunting for disabled people, and that was a tremendous change because it gave opportunities. So the gender diversity and other opportunities in disability, I really applaud, and I really think this came to stay.
And I can't, that particular point has a huge place in my heart. I have a member of my family who is in a wheelchair, and all of a sudden, and he's studying accounting, and all of a sudden he's got internships and opportunities to work from home that he did not have before. So his whole career trajectory has changed entirely because of this. One of the questions we got from the audience while you were talking about the work remotely was a question from Kaula saying, how do you develop trust with employees when they work remotely, which is something that I think a lot of people have not had to answer before.
You don't develop, you have trust. The moment an employee enters the door is someone who you trust. That is law for us. And again, I'm going to use an expression that says like, trust someone fully. Either you're going to get the lessons for life or a friend for life. So in our case, it's always a friend for life because we hire for the values and the mentality. So we try to match those skills and those characteristics. Trust is always in the front line. If you don't feel to trust someone, you never proceed. But once they enter the door, there's someone who fully trusts, and this is and not a discussion at all for us.
Now, and I completely agree with you. I think if you're not able to trust, you have to review your hiring practices, because that has to be fundamental as part of culture and ultimately how that builds towards the strategy. Now, let me backtrack just a little bit to the second half of the 2020 COVID question, which is the 2021 what's coming next question. And I sort of liken it to Thomas Friedman's book, Thank You for Being Late, in chapter, I think it's 3 or 7 or something, talks specifically about the outcomes from 2007 and 8. At the time, of course, we thought the global financial crisis was the worst thing that could happen in our lifetimes. Oh, little did we know. And now in hindsight, it is a blip compared to the issues we're facing now. But to that question, you know, same idea, 2021, inshallah, we have a vaccine. We start getting back to being out, being normal, whatever that's going to mean. How do you think that's going to look, and what are you looking forward to?
2021.
Yeah, and beyond.
Well, you mentioned something about 2007, 2008, where the crisis hit the world coming from the US towards the rest of the globe. Imagine that children were growing and then entered university. And once they went out as professional from that point, part of this world, they entered the crisis. So actually the crisis which we identify as crisis, it's norm for them. Actually is what they just grew up and they learn how to survive within that kind of the period of time we lived. So imagine like the startup businesses, they grew up, they innovate, they developed. All the startups that they happened through this kind of crisis. So power this has gave us that 2021 say it's a more prosperous and the prospects are better, then they're gonna thrive. The energy level, the intelligence level, this young generation has put through the last 10 years, this is going to move us forward. And combined with the technological advancement that they're coming, I think we're going to see in the next 10 years, inshallah, nothing else to happen because you can never predict, but with under a normal kind of condition, I believe that there are brighter days, better days coming where the young generation is going to drive forward. So we need to give them the trust level. We need to give them the thumbs up and the support they need in order to go ahead. And having said that, the most important for our company, for the companies, is to provide internships, because this is the way in and the way to allow them decide what they like to do for the future.
I can't agree with you more about the internships, apprenticeships, opportunities for individuals to come in. We had a question very early on mentioning about internships, saying, is 1 month long enough? And my response would be, take any experience that is offered to you, but your thoughts on that?
Well, I talked about work during university. So work during university cannot be more than 1 month, because I strongly believe you should leave the university years. It's very important to feel like you are still a student. So you need to have also the break. So 1 month of any kind of job is just gonna shape you as a personality. That's good. Now, during the last years of the university, probably the last year or just after you finish university, I would say, and programs we have seen, is at least 3 months. Because the moment you just go in till you learn a few things on how to operate, the month is over. But within 3 months or 4 months, you have the chance to prove yourself and at least put on your CV your achievements. In 1 month, it's just knowledge. In 4 months, I believe it's more than a knowledge. It's just work and achievements. And I always say an intern is not for coffees, is not for printing stuff, is an equal colleague to work and to learn. So the way we treat them, the way they're gonna treat the rest generations.
We are coming up on the end in just a few moments, but Dr. Leitha, who has identified herself as a woman, so I apologize for that confusion, but asked for a follow-up question because she's very interested in these as real-life examples for her classroom experiences, asked a follow-up question to the cultural enabler and blockers, and wants to know examples that you've seen of blockers in the Middle East specifically and things we should be aware of.
Well, Dr. Leitha? Leitha, sorry. Dr. Leitha, apologies. I'm not that many months in the UAE, and I can only say about the enabling environment under Crescent Enterprises we are. So I haven't come through to any blockers at this stage because I haven't been long enough to realize. But the UAE, I think the growth it had the last 10 years, it shows that it had a lot of enabling cultures rather than blockers. So to me, I can only refer to our examples, how we support, how we provide this kind of trust and transparency across our people, no silos. And as I said, the organizations are very lean, no hierarchies, and easy to approach. And that creates more of a friendly, I would say, approach of co-working. So I don't know about any blockers, and I wish that probably they're eliminated by COVID.
Inshallah, that is true. And thank you. I was very excited to see the question because, of course, we like to know that having these conversations has legs and will impact beyond the scope of this discussion. My last two questions are, the first is, what advice would you give to individuals at senior, mid, and entry level in this situation, moving forward, in owning their own learning and development in their career?
Well, it's only from my experience. If I can give advices, I would say never plan. This is something I learned in my life. I was doing plans, and I was following completely different ways by luck. Find your purpose through your job. Another example is that I did in parallel with my career. When you enter a professional environment, a company, identify the problem that nobody else wants to solve, no matter how small this is. And this is something I realized, that you can stand out because you just did something that nobody else could do, because it was pretty much trivial, administrative, but it was a problem. So once you solve this, you probably stand out, and then you can start your biggest steps to a better progress. You will be seen and you will be accepted. That is something I learned from a personal, I would say, examples. Another example I would like, and probably another advice I would give to, I also give to my children, don't follow the money. Once you are good and you like what you do, definitely money will follow you. But money is not the purpose. To me, the purpose is to be happy to what you do, because being happy, it will mean like you perform well, and you can actually contribute not only to the business, but to the community as well. Social responsibility is very important, and that's, of course, sustainability. And probably we haven't touched base on this, but sustainability is really important, and COVID helped a lot with emissions, lowering emissions, with printing. But these are, and I realized that the young generation is attracted by companies who have strong social responsibility programs. So these are, I would say, if I can say, the advices. And as someone who likes sailing, one of the proverbs I would say is, since you cannot change the wind, just trim the sails. It's up to you how to do it.
Well, I have to be honest with you, sir. I can't top, no question I will ask now will give me a better answer than that. So on that note, I will thank you very, very much for your time. Our speaker today is Dimitris Tsouroplis, Human Resources Director at Crescent Enterprises. I can't thank you enough for all of your time. I hope sincerely that we get at some point to have a follow-up conversation, because we didn't even get to my questions on sustainability. And I can't thank enough the audience who asked many, many, many more questions than I could possibly get to in 1 hour. And so with that, I want to thank you all for joining us, the HBR Arabia team and Heikel Media for their support for this particular webinar, and hope to see you all again very soon.
Shukran, everyone. Thank you for having me today.